Imagine a building so vast that no one inside it ever felt truly alone, and yet so crowded that no one inside it ever felt truly safe. A palace of countless windows, hundreds of rooms, gardens stretching so far toward the horizon that a person could walk for an hour and never reach the edge of the king's design. From a distance, in the pale light of a French dawn, it glows like something that should not exist, a mountain of gold and glass set down in the middle of empty marshland, as if someone had decided to build a paradise where no sensible person ever would. This is Versailles, and in its day it was the center of the world. But come closer. Step past the gilded gates, past the marble courtyards, past the statues frozen mid-gesture in the cold morning air, because the truth of Versailles is not in its size. The truth is in something stranger, something the paintings never show you. It is in the air that meets you the moment you step inside. It is in the sound of thousands of people breathing in rooms built for beauty, not for living. It is in the fact that this dazzling palace, the most famous house in all Europe, had almost nowhere for those thousands of people to simply relieve themselves. Versailles was not a home. It was a stage, and every single morning the curtain rose on the same extraordinary performance. For the great machine of the palace did not begin its day quietly. It began the way it always began, with a single sentence spoken in the half-dark that set 10,000 actions into motion. In the largest, most watched bedroom in France, a servant leaned toward the sleeping king and spoke the words that started everything. "Sire, it is time to arise." And with that, the day at Versailles came alive. But to understand what happened next, you have to understand something that seems almost impossible to a modern mind. Here, in this palace, the most private moments of a human life, waking, washing, dressing, were not private at all. They were public ceremonies. They were watched, they were ranked, they were fought over. Here, even the act of handing the king his shirt was a privilege so great that nobles would scheme for years to earn it. Here, the most powerful man in Europe could not put on his own clothes without an audience. And here is the part that is hardest to believe. None of this happened in some distant, savage age. It happened in a world of music and science and breathtaking art, among people who considered themselves the most refined human beings alive. They wrote poetry, they debated philosophy, they built one of the most beautiful structures the world has ever seen, and then they lived inside it in a way that, looked at closely, defies all common sense. That is the puzzle at the center of Versailles. Not how crude it was, but how a place of such intelligence and beauty could also be so strange. The closer you look, the less it makes sense, and the less it makes sense, the harder it is to look away. Welcome to the golden cage. Walk softly, and whatever you do, try not to breathe too deeply. When the king woke, he did not simply get out of bed, he performed. The first to enter the royal bedchamber were the most intimate servants, and the doctors who examined him each morning as though the health of one man were the health of the entire nation, which, in a sense, it was. Then came the chosen few, permitted the rare honor of watching the king be washed, combed, and dressed. Picture it, a man waking from sleep, his hair tangled, his eyes still heavy,
And around his bed, in respectful silence, stand the most important people in France: dukes, princes, ministers. They have risen in the cold and dark of their own cramped rooms, dressed with care, and hurried through freezing corridors for the honor of watching another man wake up. As the morning went on, the crowd grew. By the time the king was being dressed, the room might hold 100 men, all of them watching, all of them hoping to be noticed. And every gesture was assigned. The honor of handing the king his shirt did not go to a servant, it went to the highest-ranking nobleman in the room. If someone of even greater rank arrived, the shirt would be taken from one pair of hands and passed to another, mid-ceremony, simply because rank demanded it. Men of enormous wealth and ancient bloodlines stood there and watched with envy as someone slightly more important was permitted to hold a piece of linen. This sounds absurd. It was meant to, because the king understood something profound. If you make proud men compete for the smallest scraps of closeness to you, they will spend all their energy on you and none of it on rebellion. A nobleman obsessed with whether he will be allowed to hold the king's candle is a nobleman who is not raising an army back home. The endless rules of the court were not decoration, they were a leash, a soft, golden, perfumed leash, and the proudest men in France wore it willingly. And so the palace woke in layers. As the king rose, so did everyone else. In hundreds of small, dark rooms tucked into the corners and attics of Versailles, rooms with no real windows, rooms the tourist photographs never show, courtiers were dressing in the cold, checking their wigs, arranging their faces, because here the morning was a battle, and the weapon was appearance. You changed your shirt, sometimes more than once a day, because clean linen was a mark of status. You powdered your face pale. You painted a touch of color on your cheek. You placed a small black beauty patch beside your lip or your eye, each position carrying its own silent meaning. You did all of this not because you were truly clean. Most people here rarely washed in the way we understand it, but because you had to seem clean. You had to seem perfect. And the clothes themselves were a kind of warfare. A single outfit worn at court could cost more than a country house. Layers of silk and lace and embroidery so heavy that a person could barely move freely in them. The colors were rules, not choices. Certain shades, certain fabrics, certain trims were reserved for certain ranks, and to wear something above your station was an insult to the order of the entire world. So courtiers spent fortunes they did not have, sinking into debt that would haunt their families for generations, all to appear for a few hours each day exactly as splendid as the person standing beside them. And there was a cruelty hidden inside the beauty. The fashions of the court were designed almost deliberately to make ordinary life impossible. Shoes with delicate heels that turned every staircase into a small danger. Gowns so wide that a woman had to turn sideways to pass through a doorway. Wigs so tall that their wearers could not ride comfortably in a carriage. None of it was practical, and that was precisely the point. To wear such things was to announce, silently, that you did not need to be practical, that you were above the small concerns of walking, working, living. Discomfort itself had become a luxury. The more useless your clothing, the more clearly it proved you belonged to a world where usefulness no longer mattered. For in this palace, the day did not belong to those who slept well. It belonged to those who were seen. To live at Versailles was to live inside a clock.
Every part of the king's day was fixed, predictable, eternal. And because the king was a clock, so was everyone around him. People said you could tell exactly what the king was doing at any hour, from any distance, simply because his life never varied. Each morning, a great procession formed. The king emerged from his apartments and walked through the famous gallery of mirrors, that breathtaking corridor where tall windows faced tall mirrors and the light of the gardens bounced endlessly back upon itself until the whole hall became a river of gold. As he walked, the courtiers fell into place behind him in an order as strict as any army. This was the moment people waited for. Along the route, ordinary visitors gathered to glimpse the king. A few might dare to speak to him. A few might slip a folded note into a minister's hand. It was, for many of them, the closest they would ever come to power. Later in the day came the councils, and here the mask of theater slipped away, for behind all the ceremony, real power lived. The king spoke little. He listened, and he always made the final decision. The same man who let dukes fight over his shirt held the fate of millions in a few quiet words. Even his meals were a performance. He might dine privately, and yet the men of the court would be admitted to stand and watch him eat. Imagine being granted the great honor of standing in silence while a man lifts a spoon to his mouth and feeling proud to be there. Why did people endure this? Why would dukes and counts and the proudest blood of France submit to a life of standing, watching, waiting, ranking? Because at Versailles, nearness was power. To be close to the king was to matter. To be far from him was to vanish. A nobleman who stayed on his country estate, master of his own land, was nobody. A nobleman who stood in the right room at the right moment was somebody. The palace had quietly inverted the entire logic of human ambition. Real wealth, real land, these meant less than a glance, a word, a place in the procession. And so an entire art form was born, the art of waiting. A courtier might spend the whole of a long day simply standing in the right room, hoping the king would pass, hoping for a glance, a word, the smallest sign of favor. Hours of their lives, days, years dissolved into corridors and antechambers, waiting for a door to open. To us, this sounds like a slow kind of madness, but to them, it was everything. A single nod from the king, witnessed by the right people, could change a family's fortune. A single moment of being ignored could end it. They had traded freedom for proximity, and they paid for that proximity with the one thing none of us can ever get back: time. But proximity was not the only currency at court. There was another, quieter weapon, and it was perhaps more dangerous than any sword: information. In a place where everyone watched everyone, a single piece of gossip could lift a family overnight or destroy it by morning. Who had fallen out of favor? Who had whispered to whom behind a fan? Whose marriage was a quiet ruin? A rumor did not need to be true to be deadly. It only needed to be repeated by the right mouths in the right rooms. And so the smiling, bowing, perfumed crowd of the court was also, beneath the surface, a battlefield of whispers, where the most charming face might belong to your most patient enemy. This was the deepest design of all.
The whole glittering system existed to bind the dangerous, ambitious nobility to the king's side, to drain away their independence, to turn lords who might have been rivals into servants competing for slippers. Versailles was the most beautiful trap ever built, and every person inside it had walked in willingly, dressed in their finest clothes, smiling. But now we must speak of the thing the paintings never tell you. We must speak of the air. Versailles held thousands of people on a busy day. Nobles, servants, guards, visitors, hangers-on, all crammed into a building designed from its first stone for beauty and spectacle, and almost never for the ordinary needs of the human body. Because here is the secret beneath the gold. This magnificent palace had almost nowhere to go to the bathroom. There were a handful of proper facilities, but for the thousands who lived and worked here, they were never enough. Only a small fraction of the people inside Versailles had reliable, easy access to a real place to relieve themselves. Everyone else simply made do. And how they made do has become legend. Most used chamber pots, kept in their own rooms. In theory, servants emptied them. In practice, the contents were too often tossed into hallways, down stairwells, into the gardens, or straight out of the windows. Someone caught short in a crowded gallery might slip behind a curtain and use a corner. There is even a story, perfect in its absurdity, that people learned to carry umbrellas indoors, not against the rain, but against whatever might come falling from a window above. So how did anyone endure it? With perfume. They called it the perfumed court, and fragrance here was not vanity, it was a weapon, a shield held up against the air itself. Furniture was scented, visitors were perfumed at the door, gloves were perfumed, fans, wigs, even the little dogs were perfumed. Nobles carried small aromatic balls and lifted them discreetly to their noses just to survive a crowded room. And bathing? Bathing was feared. Many believed that water opened the body to disease. So instead of washing, the court wiped the skin with cloth, changed into fresh linen, and covered everything in powder and paint and scent. Cleanliness was not something you achieved, it was something you performed. And the cost of all this seeming was written, slowly, on their own bodies. The thick white powders that made a face look so flawless in candlelight were often made from substances we now know to be poison, eating away at the skin beneath until more powder was needed to hide the damage. The heavy wigs, towering and elaborate, could become homes for things no one wished to name, and fashionable men and women carried delicate little tools, disguised as jewelry, to scratch discreetly at their own scalps. The pursuit of perfect appearance was, in the end, a slow harm dressed as beauty. The same gap between appearance and reality reached all the way to the table. The feasts of the court were legendary, towers of meat and game, sugar sculpted into fantastical shapes, dishes carried in by the dozen in a parade of abundance meant to stun the eye. And yet much of this splendor was for show. Food traveled long distances through cold corridors before it reached the king, arriving lukewarm, more spectacle than supper. Dishes were arranged for the impression they made, not the pleasure they gave. And then there was the cold. For all its gold, Versailles was bitterly, miserably cold. The rooms were enormous, the ceilings impossibly high, and the great windows that flooded the halls with light in summer let the warmth escape just as easily in the dark months. Fires struggled against the vastness. Drafts moved through the corridors like something alive. There are accounts of water freezing in glasses set upon the royal table, of ink turning solid in its well, of courtiers shivering beneath their silks while smiling as though nothing were wrong. The most magnificent palace in the world could not reliably keep its own residents warm. This was the truth behind the mirrors, a palace built to be looked at, not lived in, a monument to the eye, quietly at war with the nose. And the people inside had made a desperate, unspoken bargain. You did not have to be clean. You only had to seem clean. And now we reach the strangest truth of all, the moment where the logic of Versailles tipped over into something close to madness. Because here, even the most private acts a person can perform became theater. Even those were watched. Even those became a privilege to be fought over. We have seen how the king's waking was watched, his dressing watched, his eating watched. But it did not stop there. To attend the king in his most undignified, most human moments was considered an honor, a sign that you mattered, that you were close, that you had won. The system of nearness, the entire logic that made proximity to the king the highest form of power, had followed him all the way into the most private corners of existence, and turned even those into a competition. And it was not only the queen. The queen herself was rarely truly alone. Privacy, as we understand it, simply did not exist for royalty. To be royal at Versailles was to never, ever be alone, not in joy, not in grief, not in sickness, not in the smallest ordinary moments of the day. Let that settle for a moment, because this is the heart of the whole story. Versailles was not really a palace. It was a machine for turning human dignity into power. Every natural, private, ordinary act of life had been seized, wrapped in ceremony, and offered up as a reward, and the proudest people in Europe had accepted the bargain without complaint. And yet, within this world without privacy, people still found ways to live. Behind the grand public rooms ran a hidden second palace, narrow staircases, secret passages, small private chambers tucked out of sight, where the great figures of the court could slip away for an hour and simply be human. Whispered conversations happened in these shadows, alliances were formed, secrets traded, hearts broken and mended, all just beyond the reach of the watching crowd. The palace had two faces, the dazzling public one of ceremony and gold, and the quiet, hidden one of stolen moments and private truths. And the people who survived Versailles best were the ones who learned to move between them, radiant in the light, careful in the dark. And beneath them all moved an invisible world that made the entire performance possible, an army of servants. They lit the fires before dawn and carried the water and emptied the pots and hauled the food through the freezing halls. They slept in the coldest corners, worked the longest hours, and were trained, above all, to be unseen. The whole glittering spectacle rested on their shoulders, and yet they appear almost nowhere in the paintings, almost nowhere in the grand accounts of the age. They were the hidden machinery beneath the gold, the silent thousands who kept the illusion running. And perhaps that is one of the truest things about Versailles, that every dazzling stage depends on people we are taught not to look at, working quietly in the dark so that others may shine in the light. But a system this strange could not hold forever. For while the court performed, the building itself suffered under the weight of so many bodies. The corridors grew heavy with the smell of crowded life. There were corners and stairwells that people simply learned to avoid, parts of the most glorious palace on earth that had quietly become unusable. The cracks were there, beneath the gold, growing wider with every passing year. In time, someone finally tried to fix it. Efforts were made to improve the palace, to bring it closer to a place where people could actually live with comfort and cleanliness. After generations of spectacle, Versailles was at last attempting to catch up with the simple reality of the human body. But it was too little, and it was far too late. For the same court that had spent its whole existence perfecting the art of seeming was about to discover that appearances cannot hold back history. Beyond the gilded gates, beyond the perfumed halls and powdered faces, the country was changing, and the people who had once gathered to glimpse the king were beginning to ask a dangerous question. Why should thousands of people compete to hand one man his shirt while so many others went hungry? The golden cage had been built to trap the nobility, but in the end, it trapped the king as well. And when the storm finally came, no amount of perfume could cover the smell of it. Walk through Versailles today, and the crowds are still there. Not courtiers now, but visitors, moving in slow rivers through the same gallery of mirrors, pausing in the same rooms, standing in the same bedchamber where a king once woke each morning to the words, "Sire, it is time to rise." Without knowing it, they follow almost exactly the path the king once walked. The procession never truly ended, only the faces changed. But the palace is quiet now. The dukes no longer fight over the royal shirt. The chamber pots are gone, and so is the heavy air, and so is the strange, suffocating, glittering world that once filled these rooms with thousands of breathing, scheming, performing souls. We look at this place and we see beauty, and it is beautiful, undeniably, almost painfully so. But behind the beauty was a bargain. And the bargain should give us pause. An entire civilization's most powerful people agreed to surrender their privacy, their dignity, even the basic comforts of the body, in exchange for nearness to power. They lived in cold little rooms above gilded halls. They competed for the honor of watching another man sleep and eat and dress. They covered the truth with perfume and told themselves it was enough. And perhaps that is the real lesson of Versailles. It was a place where appearance defeated reality at every turn, until the day reality came back to collect what it was owed. It is strange to think how completely this world has vanished. The rules that governed every waking moment, who could sit, who must stand, who could speak first, who held the shirt, were once treated as the most serious matters on earth, worth a lifetime of struggle. Today, they seem like the customs of another planet, a game whose stakes we can barely imagine. And perhaps that is the quiet warning hidden in all this gold. Every age believes its own rules are permanent, its own performances real and necessary. Versailles believed it too, right up until the moment the music stopped. And yet, the strangest thing of all is how easily we recognize ourselves in it. We no longer fight over who hands the king his shirt, but we still perform. We still polish the version of ourselves we show the world, still arrange the surface so carefully that no one sees the mess behind it. The courtiers of Versailles simply did it without screens, without distance, in person and in public, every single hour of every single day. They were not so different from us. They had only built a far more beautiful stage on which to do the most human thing of all, to be seen as we wish to be, rather than as we are. So the next time you see those famous images, the endless gardens, the river of mirrors, the gold that seems to glow from within, Remember what they do not show you. Remember the cold rooms in the attic. Remember the umbrellas carried indoors. Remember the perfume and the reason it was needed. And remember that the most beautiful cage ever built was still, in the end, a cage. The candles have burned low. The halls are silent. The performance is over. And all that glory, all that gold, all that endless careful seeming, in the end, it could not outlast the simple, stubborn truth of what lay beneath it.